Out of heartbreak came hope, and out of loss, a legacy that now serves thousands. Tonight's guest turned unimaginable pain into purpose, building a foundation that helps family find peace and stability in their hardest moments. You're about to hear how compassion, courage, and contribution define the true meaning of prosperity.
Here we go! Nicole Johnson, Nicole Johnson, Nicole Johnson, let's go!
And welcome to Prosperity Conversations. I am the Nicole Johnson, and tonight's guest, and I'm not going to chop up her name, y'all. Y'all know how bad I feel about that. So I'm going to have Miss Michelle pronounce her last name and introduce herself for us when she comes up. But she is a mother, an advocate, and a nonprofit founder whose story redefines prosperity through compassion and purpose. In 2018, Michelle faced every parent's worst nightmare when she lost her daughter, Colette Louise, after a high risk pregnancy. Somebody felt that. I understand that. During her weeks in the hospital, she saw the immense financial strain that families face, and she vowed to change that. On Colette's due date, she founded the Colette Louise Tashdal Foundation, a national organization that has since provided more than $1.9 million dollars in financial assistance to over 3,400 families across all 50 states. That is amazing. Michelle's mission is simple but profound: to give families hope, dignity, and support when life feels most fragile. Her journey is a testament that prosperity is not about accumulation, but contribution. Come on to the stage, Michelle.
Hi.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. You listen, do me a favor. Tell the audience your name.
So it's Michelle Valiukenas.
Yes,
Yeah,
Michelle Valiukenas. Now, when I hear it, I can repeat it.
Yeah,
But
no,
listen.
totally understand.
This is amazing. I am absolutely amazed by what started out the way it did and what it's turned to. I am so, Michelle, can I tell you I'm proud of you?
Oh, thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
proud of you because there are some tragedies that people experience
Right.
and they go in a totally different direction: depression, suicide, and it seems to be something more common, right? But not only did you find a way to go on your journey of healing, but now to actually extend yourself to help others so that they can, receive assistance when they just don't know that life really is worth living.
Right.
Okay. So I really, really appreciate that. It's powerful. And when we start talking about turning pain into purpose, what I'd like to do is start where we always start. What does the word prosperity mean to you personally?
I think for me personally, prosperity is about how you are giving back into the world and how you are sharing what you have, right? So, we hear the term privilege battered around a lot these days, right? We all have some
Mhm.
sort of privilege, okay?
Right,
Some of us have more privileges than the others and all this. And it's really being, I think, in touch with what are your privileges, what are your strengths, what are the things that you can do, and then how can you help somebody who doesn't have those?
yes,
And that was very much why, for me, starting the foundation was very important. I'm very privileged. I was in a financial state that I could actually afford to be in the hospital and not be worried about if I was going to be able to put food on the table and if our mortgage was going to get paid and all of that. And I knew that that was a privilege. And so it was like, what can I do with that? Knowing that, what can I do with that? And I think that's really prosperity, is saying what I have, we're going to spread. And that's all over the place, right? So, from people who aren't, getting much money to all the way up to billionaires, right?
right.
Well, I'll defer and say, I'm just going to allow for billionaires to be there, even though I have a problem with billionaires in this society. But it's really just saying, here's the things I have, right?
Right,
Look at the
right.
things I can do, right? I can speak the
Mhm.
language. I can, I know how to cook. I can share food. I can, whatever that
Mhm.
might be. I think we all have that. And so to
Right.
me, I've always felt this need of like part of our journey as humans is to be figuring out how we're giving to others. And that's part of my whole thing. And I think that's the prosperity is like we all have prosperity. It doesn't have to always be financial. We all have things that we can give back to those who may not have what we have.
Oh, that's amazing. Even when I thought about, what do you want to be when you grow up,
Right.
right? And my goal was to be an attorney. And it wasn't because the profession was so esteemed. I was really repelled by those who I'm a lawyer. So, and
I'm a recovering attorney over here, so I totally understand what you're
I
saying.
read that.
Yeah.
My goal was to be that voice for
Mhm.
people who could not speak for themselves.
Right.
And it didn't take all of that arrogance and condescending attitude that people had, men and women alike,
Right.
because your profession is so astute. It doesn't matter,
Right.
because if you are positioning yourself when you know something more than others and you have a skill set that others could benefit from and you're not using it to help others. There's some other words that I have for you, but we're gonna
Right.
keep it clean over here. So
Yeah.
I do I appreciate when people have that value system on. Not I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking for someone who doesn't have a voice, or they
Mhm.
have a voice and they don't know how to use it. So
Right.
I really, really do appreciate it. It was what made me say, yes, she has to come and be a part of the prosperity conversation. And so when I think about your story in dealing with the loss,
Mhm.
right? So powerful that you have changed that. You transformed that pain into not only your purpose, but your purpose into other people's,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
To help them. So do me a favor, tell me about the defining moment when your foundation was first born.
Yeah. So I was hospitalized at 21 weeks unexpectedly with severe preeclampsia. Um, at the time, I had no warning signs. Some intuition told me to go to the OB, and that's what sort of had, led to
Mhm.
everything. And I was in the hospital and told I would be there until I delivered. And so, like, I like to
Mm.
give the context of what that looks like. I was admitted the night of May 8th, and my due date was September 7th. So, um, that I feel like always, you can
Yes,
count
that
numbers of
brings
weeks,
it
but that
home.
kind of like
Right,
really,
right. Numbers
um,
matter.
right. And so, to have everything turned upside down, right? And
Yeah.
all the worries and, everything from the most serious, like, am I going to survive this? What does this mean? Um, down to the mundane of like, we don't have a car seat, like all those kinds of things, or, we don't have a crib, right? Not recognizing all the other things that need to happen in the meantime. But once I was in the hospital a day or two, one of the things that I realized was with all that list of worries, and there was a lot of them, the one
Mhm.
thing that was not on that list, and I did not need to put on my list, was the financial piece. And that
Mhm.
really was something that, yes, I was so thankful that I didn't have to do that. But I also very quickly realized that was not something most people could say.
That's right.
And, and then as I would hear from friends who would visit, who would text, who would call, I would think about them and I would think, how long could you survive, if all of a sudden your income was cut? Or,
Mhm.
how would you do this? And I really kept thinking this. And I was thinking, you know, my friends were all in a pretty good financial state. And
Mhm.
for me to sit there and say that, what about all the people? Right. And I worked with clients who were very low income. How were they going to do this?
Right.
And I really, that kept coming back to me. So the story is always, I was in the hospital a day or two and I started thinking this and I said something about this to my husband and said, we need to do something about it. And he said, please, for once in your life, could you just think about yourself? And my response was, you know who you married. And that was sort of the end of that conversation. But it kind of just stuck with me. It just kept coming back up for me. And so I was in the hospital a little over 3 weeks before they recommended delivery. And Colette was born at 24 weeks and 5 days, so 16 weeks early, and spent 9 days in the NICU. And I would see it in the NICU. I would see how families were strained. I would see women going back to work who had given birth after I did. So, 3 days postpartum, 5 days postpartum. And I was like, how are you doing this?
Right.
And, thinking about this. And then, after loss, it's a lot of quick decisions. Do you want to cremate? Do you want to bury? You know, all of those things cost money. And
Mhm.
that was something. And so it kind of just kept coming up. I will always say I didn't think I could start something. I didn't think I wanted to start something. But this message just kept coming back to me. And
Mhm.
really what I found was like nobody was doing what I had seen in this vision of all of this that had been, kind of done. And at the same time, people were, I was getting messaging from the world basically. It was like, okay, now stop talking about your daughter. And I was like, no, 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 no. This is my daughter. And if she was live and I didn't talk about her, people would think I was,
Something was wrong with
something was wrong
you.
with me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So to me, I was like, just because she died does not mean she stopped being my daughter or that I
That's
stopped being her
right.
mother or anything like that. And so it's kind of like the two worlds were sort of competing in my head. And I finally was like, I think that this is what the universe is sending me to do. And I think that this is how I keep Colette's memory and name alive. And I think this is how
Mhm.
I'm going to be her mother, right? It's not
Mm.
anything that I had ever chosen, but this is how I'm going to do it. And I think that was really what was my guiding light to do it. And so, yeah.
Virtual hug. Virtual hugs. That's amazing. And it's really such I think people think that they are being helpful,
Mhm.
right? You can't ever tell anybody
No,
what grief looks like or when it stops.
right, right,
Right? I mean, there's sometimes your good friend might just need to come and sit on the couch next to you. I don't need you to say anything.
right,
Just be there. Maybe
right.
grab me a bowl of ice cream from the freezer, but don't say nothing else, just be there. So it is. And I'm glad you pushed forward with that because
Mhm.
her name now lives.
Right,
Her memory, she's always a part of you, but now
right.
her name lives on. So this is a beautiful way of using your purpose to keep love alive. And what I want to say is now when I was reading about your story and the information provided, prosperity in action is your foundation has helped over 3,400 families across the nation, and that is absolutely incredible. Please share how your programs provide clarity and confidence to families in crisis and how you've seen that support create ripple effects of hope.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think it's saying, we have this situation, and I'm actually in the process of updating our data, but our most recent data was saying we were seeing an average of an $8,000 drop in income related to something that was happening, whether that be the high risk or complicated pregnancy, a NICU stay or loss, or sometimes a combo of things.
Hmm.
And, you know, most people can't like really imagine losing $8,000 of income.
Right.
And I think that what it has done is it is saying, is one acknowledging the grief and the pain and the hurt and the saying, we hear you, we see you, we've been there, and let's extend a helping hand. But then it's also the financial piece of like, what can we relieve that removes an obstacle to being able to focus on your health, on your family's health. And so that could be, anything from gas gift cards to get you to and from to visit your baby in the NICU, right? Uh,
Mhm.
can we keep your phone on so that you can be in communication with doctors? Um,
Mm.
in a case where a baby is going to go home on medical equipment, can we make sure that your electricity stays on?
Right.
Or, for the medical, either whether there be medicines or equipment or treatment that a doctor is recommending, and yet an insurance company is not going to pay for or not going to pay completely for it. Can we help that so that you are going home with a better peace of mind that, your baby is going to be safe? And then in cases of loss, can we do the, whether it's a burial, a cremation, something that is giving you that first step in healing, right? This is a situation no parent should ever have to be thinking about what they're doing with their child, right? We're supposed to outlive our
Right.
children, all of that. And so when you're doing that, and then you're also like, I don't know how to do this financially.
Mm-hmm.
It's so terrible to think that, I one time said, I don't know what we did for Colette in terms of burying her. I don't know what we paid. I know we handed over our credit card twice. At the funeral home and at the cemetery. I have no idea. And somebody said, well, you should find out. And I said, I honestly don't want to know, because I want to say that this is the thing of like, I just did this, right?
Right.
I was in the position to just be like, here you go. And that was that was one less thing that I had
One
challenged
less
me
thing to
in the
worry
grief,
about.
in the
Right.
grieving process.
Right.
And so what is it that we can do to kind of take one thing, or more than one thing if possible, off of
Mm-hmm.
that plate and give that little bit of relief and that little bit of ability to say, okay, now I can focus on my child, or I can focus on myself or my partner, or whatever that might be, depending on the situation. And so that's really, what we're trying to do, is to say, let's do this. And I think also, at the same time, is let's try to get to some equity in this system that is sorely lacking
Mm-hmm.
equity, and say, just because you're in this economic, bracket, or just because you live in this one place or something, how can we make it, and I mean, making it equitable is such a bigger piece, right? But here's this little piece of how we're trying to remove some of those barriers to achieve, hopefully, that equity at some point. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
really what I'm doing. I think the ripple effects is, it's so hard to say this, but it's, what we hear a lot of times is we hear from families who, yes, appreciate the money, and they explain what that did, and the, I got to go see my child more regularly. I was less stressed, all of that.
Right.
And we can talk about, there's research saying that parents who are involved in NICU care, babies do better, parents do better. So we can say that, we can, we can cite all those kinds of things, but I think it's also just being heard by somebody who's been through it.
That's it.
A hallmark of our program, and something that I want to keep for as long as, humanly possible, is my husband and I sit down and review every application. And so we are reading it, and we're reading it through the lenses of people who have been parents in all of those situations, right? The pregnancy
Right.
that something happens and it causes, it's no longer, the normal pregnancy, whatever that, really means, but
Right.
something has happened, had a child in the NICU and known what that looks like, and lost a child and known what that looks like. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is something we're coming with it from a lens that not a lot of other organizations could say that. But it's like,
Right.
we understand those nuances. And I think that that's really important. And I think it's giving people, to see there's people on the other side who have lived this, who have survived this. And
Right.
you can too. Because
Right.
when you're in the thick of trauma, you don't think, first of all, you think you're the only person that this
The
has ever
only
happened to,
one that
right?
nobody else has gone through this.
And to
I'm the
realize,
only
like,
one.
there are other people who have, A,
Right.
and B, there are people who survived after it. And I think that
Right.
that's such an important piece. And I really like, more so than the, I paid my electric bill messages. I like those messages because I think they're so powerful to just say somebody else went through this and came out and is surviving and is living with it. And
Right.
so maybe I can too.
Right, right. It's that beacon of hope that you are that you're giving them. And what comes to me is that you're not just giving families relief, you're actually helping them establish some sort of control.
Right.
Because when things happen like that, you're all out of control, you're all out of whack, you're going in so many different directions. You don't know up from down, left from right, but this is giving them the chance to actually not only have some support, but allow them to make these decisions with dignity.
Right.
And I absolutely love that, because that is another definition of prosperity, financial empowerment, just really helping people to keep their wits about themselves. And I love
Mhm.
that. My son was in a NICU for some time, not very long, but there was several trips back and forth seeing a cardiologist, and that lasted for well over a year. So I know the stress of not knowing,
Right.
what is going to happen. When is the doctor coming back? And then you got a partner here, that's my husband is sitting there. He doesn't know head from a hole in the wall, and
Right.
yeah, I don't have time to stress about your stress because my stress is for this baby. So just
Right.
all kinds of
Right.
things, and you go in different directions, and so
Yeah.
I
And
love
I think
what you
there's so much
do.
in those things. There's so much noise coming at you. I don't think people
Oh,
realize how
absolutely,
much there
yes.
is, right? And yes, it's one thing in the NICU. I mean, I always say like walking into a NICU is a sensory overload for anybody,
Hmm.
let alone
Hmm.
if you're in trauma and your child is there. It's just a sensory overload. But it's also just you're hearing doctors, you're hearing this. There's so much noise going on and so many things inside your own head, and you're hearing all this stuff. And it's like, that's what I want to try is really is like, how can we break through and give you like a moment of quiet
Peace.
and a moment
Yes,
of like peace?
yes, yes,
Because those are
yes,
so hard to come by, those
yes,
moments.
yes,
And, what does that look like? And how can we get you to that point?
yeah.
Um, and so that's something I really hope we do because it's
Yeah,
something we don't
I
think
can
about
only
enough.
imagine that you do, and I love it. I'm hoping that after this we can have a conversation about you telling more of your story,
Yep.
sharing more of what you do at our prosperity fair in April. But I'll get
Yes.
you more details about that. Um, what you said so far is aligning with the prosperity movement. Okay. Um, it's more about the progress with purpose. It's giving people dignity while they make decisions. So, what I want to ask you is for the person who is watching right now, who may be walking through loss or grief and wondering if they'll ever find joy or purpose again, what would you say to them?
I would say you will. It's going to be hard. It's going to be different.
Mhm.
Um, I sort of akin to the vision I have of like grief is like it's sort of that like the parrot that sits on your shoulder, in some things.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
always there, right? It's always
Mhm.
there. It's part of you from now on. Um, and it's going to change you. You are not the same person you were before you experienced that. Like that's
Right.
just, I always share the story of I kept waiting to just go back to the person I was. And
Mhm.
a family friend who had lost a child 20 some years before one time said to me, this was in the first year or so after loss, said, there are times still when I'm in the car and I just start crying for no reason.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like, yeah, that was overwhelming to be like, in 20 years, what? But it also was very freeing because it was like, so I'm not waiting for this magic thing to come back. I'm just going to live
Right.
my life from now on.
Right.
It's one step at a time. It's one day at a time. It's acknowledging your feelings. It's knowing that you're not gonna live in what you feel in the immediacy or what you feel at a year later. You're not gonna live in that permanently.
Right.
Life is gonna keep going, and you're gonna figure out how to adapt to a new normal.
Mm.
And you're gonna laugh, and you're gonna have fun, and you're gonna have joy, and you're also gonna have sadness.
Mhm.
And I think about this all the time. There's been reports of, and this didn't exactly happen to me, but that the first time a parent laughs after their child died, that the first time they laugh, that they smack their hands over their mouth because to them it's like, wait, how can I be doing this? And I had a very similar situation. My husband and I don't remember exactly how long it had been. We went out to dinner and we actually we really enjoyed each other's company, and we had fun
Mhm.
and we laughed and we did everything. And we got home and I started crying because it was like, how could we have had this time when we
Mhm.
don't? And really, I had to accept that there is going to be that. There are days where, I'd laugh all day long. And then there are days where it's like, yeah, this is a really hard day today.
Yeah.
And it's really learning to ride the roller coaster and learning how to shape your world around how grief fits into your life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the important part. Um, people have always said to me, like, I don't know how you survive this. And I'm like, you do it because you do it. Right. And so, like, for me, I would say, let's break it down. I really had one of two options to begin with. I end my life or I continue on. Right.
That's it. That's it.
And ending my life did not feel, I was never
That was
there.
an option. That was
And
an
that was not
option.
an option. And so I had to
Right.
continue on. And then when I decided I had to continue on, it was like one of two ways. Either I can go on and I can live my life and I can make meaning of it and live it, or I can become angry and bitter.
Right.
And to me, angry and bitter was not the way I wanted it to be, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chose the other way. And it's not easy. And that's also not to say that I don't have days that are angry and bitter. I absolutely
Right.
do. Sometimes more often than I would like.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's overall saying, this happened to me, and now I'm going to go forward and figure out how this works in my life after that. And I think that's really powerful.
It is. It is so powerful. You've reminded us that even through pain, we can still build something that helps to heal others. And that is truly prosperity in motion. You said something about, I could choose to be bitter because of what has happened. And Michelle, I'll just say, we got bitter folk walking around here and they haven't even
Mhm.
gone through half of what
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
So it
Mhm.
really is a choice. And I love that you are at that point. And I know it was a hard journey. And that doesn't mean that the journey is over. You
Right.
just don't go around that. You just don't go around it as often,
Mhm.
right? So you have to give yourself the same amount of grace that you extend to everybody else
Right.
and recognize, you know what? It's not a good day. I'm gonna stay over here.
Right.
I'm gonna stay. You
Right.
stay over there. I'm gonna stay over here.
Right.
And though the people who matter are gonna recognize that. So
Mhm.
thank you for being part of the prosperity conversations and for showing us that true prosperity begins with compassion and purpose. And to everyone who is watching, if this conversation moved you, I want you to make sure that you stay tuned for additional prosperity conversations, as well as our Speaker Prosperity Summit Fair that'll be coming in April. And as I tell you all the time, I am the Nicole Johnson, wanting to remind you that prosperity isn't something that you chase. It's something you create through purpose, compassion, and as Michelle has exhibited, through service to others. Thank you guys so much. Until next time.